Hey Bart, nice meeting you.
Hi. Hi.
Hi. Cool. Thank you. I'm so glad to have you on this conference today and
Cool. Thanks.
to watch your talk in a couple of minutes. But first of all, I'd like you to tell the audience a bit on your background and what you've been doing for the past couple of years.
All right. So I've been a software engineer for about 12 years now, and 7 years at the company where I started, and now for 5 years I've been at bol.com, which is largest online retailer of the Netherlands. I'll be introducing that in the talk, and there I've mostly focused on backend engineering. Mostly in stock keeping. And now recently I've been transitioning more and more, as bol.com has been transitioning more and more to DevOps. I have myself jumped into the challenge of trying to get that right, because it's a non-trivial transformation, and
you're promising it the way Google does DevOps, so we got high expectations for you.
Right, yeah. So we were looking around for places to learn, and then we were also transitioning to the Google Cloud. So there were a couple of consultants around, and they said, what way you could try? But also some of the engineers, one of which was me, had seen talks about SRE around at conferences, so we were already interested, and all that merged into we're gonna try this.
Yes. And as we heard in the talk before, like, be careful not to get into the window lock-in, so use abstraction layer.
Yeah, Antos solves that, right?
Yeah. Okay. And site reliability engineering. We're all interested. Have you had some catastrophes recently, or
well, of course?
What was the biggest catastrophe? So let's just dive in with the biggest blowout.
The biggest catastrophe. Well, we had a really fun Cloud SQL outage. So Cloud SQL is the Google specific SQL offering, like Postgres, MySQL. We use Postgres, and so most of our Cloud SQL instances, they died. And since we did not have the right kind of monitoring and the right kind of resiliency at various places in the location, long story short, one of the applications that processed notifications to our apps, it ended up in a loop, resending everything, and basically DDoSed ourselves. So we were pretty big out of the air for, I think, like 6 hours. So that was major disaster.
For a retailer, 6 hours loss of orders means a lot, I guess.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
And there is your member of the site reliability team. So there's a specific team only concerned with uptime, 100% uptime.
Well, I'm a member of the site reliability engineering team, and we're brand new within the company. So what we're trying to do is evangelizing this way of working to make sure that everybody uses it. Because to be honest, at the front end, at the website, of course, we have a large backend, lots of microservices, and then there's a big application server, which is, of course, old because it's as old as we exist as a company. But so it's one of the more legacy systems we have, and that also has a dedicated team that concerns that uptime. But that is one of the teams that has the most experience that we're drawing from to teach the rest of the company about how you can apply SRE right.
And as far as my experience goes, I always had the feeling that here's reliability and here is development with new features, and they somehow bump into each other, because if you're responsible for keeping things up, you don't want new features because you know things are working and you don't want to change it, but it's the job of the developers to and the business side obviously wants new things to be released. So you always have this clash of cultures, clash of work,
clash of incentives even,
clash of incentives.
and this was exactly what sold me personally on the mindset, on the way of working, because you have this clash, and because one wants to go more changes, less changes, because stability. And what SRE aims to do is to take that clash and turns it into a unified progress by realigning that on the North Star of user happiness.
So the developers, they know nowadays they provide like health handles / health of a microservice who provide some sort of value, and which can then directly go into the monitor. So
it's of course not the same as liveness and readiness checks. But it really is about realigning both your innovation and your operations on the functional metrics, SLOs. Like instead of measuring, say, amount of messages in a queue, you measure how long does it take before the data is actually at the user. So what does our user experience, and then you try to find the functional metrics that correlate best to that user happiness. So what can we measure that will indicate when our users will be unsatisfied with our service? And by doing that, and by making an upfront agreement on that metric, you prevent the clash, because there's an agreement, which means that both sides of the equation can also already steer to that upfront agreement.
So they have the same goal basically, and not opposing goals that
exactly
clash every time.
And one of the most awesome times that this worked for us was when business had developed like a new design for the front page. There was like a year-long project. All kinds of people had opinions and worked really long about that, and then they went live. Big party, we went live with the new design. But then on that same day, the SLOs that we had for the front page, it started showing that it was being displayed too slowly. And since there was this upfront agreement between business and development and operations to for a certain response time of the front page, it was actually business themselves that said, "Oh, we have to pull this." And the fact that question came from business. Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so that's why Amazon still looks the way like it looked like 10 years ago, more or less.
Exactly.
It's like, don't put the shadow there, don't put the line there, let's save every byte. So the crappy PCs, the crappiest PCs have it loaded in 1 second. So wow. Okay, so I guess like the big site, like BOL also has like a continuous development cycle, and maybe even production releases are rolled out automatically, and this is highly tested. So in order to avoid any crashes or failures or even sales dropping. So how often per day does BOL.com release?
So like we give much freedom to teams to release their individual products. So we have thousands of releases a day.
Okay, wow.
But the main website, which is one of the more legacy, that one goes daily. But all the teams, we have about 100 development teams, more than 1,000 microservices, and they just every release goes to every feature goes to production. It's just and of course there's front runner teams that do this better than some of the more conservative teams. But we really aim at continuous delivery.
Okay, and I guess there's like some sort of split testing, like a new feature which might be risky, like only 5% of the people has shown this feature, and if it works out, then like 10%, 20%, and it's like these.
Well, we talk about that a lot, but we rarely do it. We do use feature flags a lot to decouple deployment from release. But we do have a system to do canary releases, but I think it's only been really done once or twice. But it's everyone's ambition.
Okay, but you do it the Chuck Norris way, like a new software for everybody, and then
Yeah, but of course there's lots of automated integration tests, and there's this whole process and awesome people actually.
And I've got one last question. If you, I mean, if we writing modern applications, we can obviously use the legacy. We can use the microservice paradigm, and but lots and lots of giant corporations that have lots of legacy systems, and they're, on my experience, it's somewhat disappointing if they ask, we have this like 20-year-old detection software. The guys left, the teams left, nobody knows, but it works. But we want to have this software also monitored and controlled in the new system or in the new environment. Then it becomes kind of hard, in my experience, and to tell them that maybe it's just better to let it just run and don't touch it instead of fumbling too much with it.
Yeah, so one of the engineers in my team had like a really close first-hand experience with this, because we have a warehouse management system that's actually an outhouse system that uses some kind of archaic DSL, and it doesn't really work well, and it's definitely not monitorable. But he really went in there and basically build a monitoring system from scratch in that strange little language, just to make sure that we've got the insight into that reliability that we actually need. So that was really hard, and we really aimed for that. Exactly.
And
exactly.
You felt like an archaeologist, like putting on Indiana Jones head and say, okay, let's find out
does indeed
what happened
feel
long before. Okay.
Yeah. It's like going to the deep end, putting in the work.
Okay, thanks, Bart. I think Nicholas, the previous speaker, they asked you on the chat to get in touch with him. And I would like to start now with the recording of your awesome speak. And then later we'll be back again here to have some Q&A session. But for our viewers, sit back and enjoy Bart's talk.
All right, welcome to the case for site reliability engineering. To kick it off, a small story. About a month ago, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken launched the International Space Station on a SpaceX Falcon 9. And it was quite an exciting launch, because it was the first crewed launch from American soil in almost a decade. And it was also the very first time that a crew launched on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. And now, I've been fortunate enough to experience a rocket launch myself once in my life. Not on the rocket, of course, but a buddy of mine and I, we flew out to Florida, and we camped out at Jetty Park, which is across the bay from Cape Canaveral Air Force Base. And it was a night launch, so at around 2-3 a.m. We walked out to the pier, and there were lots of people already there waiting for the launch to happen, and there were like barbecues and radios and screens everywhere following the live stream. And so it was like a real good atmosphere. And as the countdown was going on the live stream, suddenly, like, boom, the entire horizon lit up with fire. And I was genuinely worried that like the rocket had exploded or something like that. But then we saw like this tiny candle go like up and up and up and up in the distance. Like, whoa, that's cool. And then we were already like quite impressed, but then the wind came and like flew in our faces, and there was like a big rumbling noise that went all through your body. And I was like, oh, it was so intense. Now, we were 25 kilometers away from the rocket. Imagine what that would be like when you're on the rocket. Whew. You want your system to be reliable then. Now, luckily, most of us don't build rockets or pacemakers. So for us, reliability is a balance between cost and risk. To manage that balance, let's talk about SRE. So site reliability engineering is basically the way that Google has been managing that balance between innovation and stability. And it was developed at Google around just after the millennium, so early 2000s. And they went public with it somewhere halfway in this decade, 2015, 2016, I think. And in a nutshell, it's basically what happens if you let a software engineer design an operations function. But much more critically, it seeks to realign the traditionally conflicting incentives of innovation that wants lots of change and operation that wants little change, because all change brings risk, brings instability. So what SRE does is it takes these traditionally conflicting incentives and realigns them both around a single purpose of improving user happiness. And this is not a SRE 101 talk. Now, this talk is about how we as an enterprise scale company approach SRE as the next step on our DevOps journey, because we transitioned into a more DevOps way of working around 2016. But now we really think that by adopting SRE for Bol.com, we can take the next step and be even more effective and be even more autonomous in our reliable innovation. As I said, this is not SRE 101, but there is a couple of terms that I want to go through with you, and this is what SRE uses to align these incentives to, and that is the service level indicator, which is a technical metric that can be measured on the system, but closely correlates to user happiness. So if this metric is trending down, then user happiness should be trending down likewise. And then the service level objective is a target on that earlier defined metric, so that by having this clear upfront target, all parties involved know what the consequences of the state of the indicator are. The most fun part about SRE, and what got me hooked as a software engineer, is what it does with this service level objective. Because instead of just looking at it as a target, it also looks at it as an opportunity, and that is your error budget. And since you've defined a clear target for your reliability, you can use this error budget to experiment and to accelerate your innovation. And that's really one of the more powerful things about SRE, and one of the things that I personally have lots of fun with. So let's talk a little bit about Bol.com. So we're an enterprise level organization. We're a purely online retailing platform. We're based in the Netherlands and Belgium, where we're the largest online retailing platform, and we're part of the Ahold Delhaize group of companies. Our headquarters are in Utrecht, where we used to work before COVID, with around 2,000 people. We've been growing consistently for about 30% a year. Over the last 20 years, we originally started as a bookstore, but have now expanded to cover everything that is not food. So we have toys, furniture, pet toys, and stuff. And you can imagine we have like 12 million active customers, I think. That leads us to ship a couple 100,000 packages a day from our warehouses. And you can imagine that there's a pretty broad software ecosystem behind running all this. It's mostly microservices of which we have about 1,000, all collaborating. And then there's about 700 people who are innovating on those systems. As I mentioned, we're also an online platform, so there's about 30,000 other retailers that also sell via bol.com, mostly local players. How did bol.com get to finding SRE as the next step on our DevOps journey? So bol.com started around 1999, and like the first 10 years it was all fairly traditional waterfall development. Then around 2009 they had the agile transformation and started to putting more focus on Scrum teams. But throughout this time, all our operations have been handled by a third party. So there was an external company managing our operations for us. And you can imagine that didn't really help this agile transformation. Like getting new releases done was lots of back and forth between the two companies. So around 2013, we brought operations in-house, and we set up a really top-level operations team to manage that. And in 2014 was when I joined bol.com. And then in 2016, we launched our big DevOps transformation, which we call the Man on the Moon project, like the autonomy and scalability that DevOps could bring us. That was really our moonshot. And then also around 2016, Google launched their site reliability engineering book, their first site reliability engineering book. They launched a workbook later, and then a really interesting security-based one a couple months ago. And of course, people at bol.com took notice. So both on our ops side and our development side, there were people that read the book, went to the conferences, and really started getting enthusiastic about this. But it was all based on individual initiative, and bits and pieces were being picked up where it was useful, left and right, but no concentrated effort. Then around 2017, we took a next step in our DevOps transformation, and that's that we also included some of our software engineers in our out-of-office hours on-call support. And this was a pretty big step for us because both contractually and financially, we didn't want to require our software engineers to do on-call duty. And balancing that with true DevOps, that's a puzzle that we basically started around 2017. And then in 2018, we brought our operations in-house to our own managed data center in 2013. But around 2018, we realized that's not what we want to be doing. So we started our transition to the Google Cloud. And we're moving towards a product-based organization to provide some architectural and business alignment in this whole different broad ecosystem of innovation teams. Now, in last year, in 2019, also powered by the cloud and what came from that, we finally brought a bunch of these enthusiasts together, and we started with a part-time SRE team pilot. But what we found there was that a part-time SRE team didn't work so well for us because the backlog pressures of those engineers that were also in normal Scrum teams still, that often outweighed the more long-term vision that the SRE role required. So there was a clear learning for us that was not the way we wanted to approach it. So based on those learnings, we wrote a plan for 2020, and then finally this year we launched our dedicated SRE team. As I mentioned, we started our transition to DevOps in 2016. So why do we now need SRE? Because SRE implements DevOps, right? So it's just another way of doing DevOps. So you build it, you run it, you love it. That was our catchphrase for the Man on the Moon project. And of course, you build it, you run it. That's certifiably DevOps. But we added you love it because we love it. And this worked really well. We really saw better ownership of operations, better adoption of operations at engineering teams. But what we were doing, we were focusing mostly on building the tooling to empower teams to do operations themselves, and then explaining them how to use that tooling to do the operations. But there were all kinds of questions that we hadn't really covered yet, like how do I balance ops work with dev work, and how do I convince downstream teams to work on reliability, and how do I get ops buy-in from business? And how do I judge instant work versus long-term innovation work? And all these kinds of questions, they kind of revolve around the core aspect of what DevOps is. Because development is a relevant specialty, and it's like many specialties actually. And so is operations. That is also a craft on its own that requires deep knowledge. But the combination of the two is an entirely separate specialization that requires its own craftsmanship. I personally think was the part that we underestimated about our DevOps transition. And we could see this in our metrics, like our mean time to recovery, which initially improved, really started degrading again. And so around the end of 2019, there were 3 main big issues remaining. Like, we have been doing this DevOps transition for a couple of years already, and actually most people considered it done, except for that we were regressing in our metrics, and there were these three issues. So the first big issue was that the knowledge that we shared, it hadn't been properly safeguarded yet. New people and some of the teams started losing touch with the operation side, so it didn't really work for us. And then the alignment of high over value chains between different teams, and then especially the non-functional alignment, there was no view on that whatsoever. And the out of office hour support, as we mentioned, we don't want to demand of our software engineers that they join on-call rotation, but we do want to have our 24/7 operational responsibility be with our software engineers. So managing this balance, that was something we still hadn't solved yet. So all that background basically led to what was the case for SRE at Bol.com. And it comes down to that DevOps is much more than tools. The tools help, but the most important thing is the craftsmanship, the mindset of the people that do it. And since we're growing every year, it means that if we don't get this right, we're gonna be getting less and less returns on our innovation investment every year. And that's a surefire way to die as a company. So getting this right is vital. And as I mentioned, there are specific issues that we think SRE can fix for us, or an SRE team can fix for us. And it's an external standard. And why we like that is, of course, it allows us to learn from others who have more experience with it. And it also eases the discussion of adoption. Since we're not inventing our own wheel, there is external experts that you can point to and say, this is why this is a good idea. And they have figured this out for us. So that's why we're doing SRE at Bol.com. So let's go into how we're organizing it and what we're doing as an SRE team. As I mentioned, we're coming from a history where we've built our own operations team, where we're transitioning towards DevOps, and we're putting more and more responsibility to the software engineering teams. So we can't just say, all right, now everything is SRE. So what we've done is we started with a small, concentrated team of site reliability engineers, and they are going to be laying the groundwork for what we expect to be a more significant SRE team later down the line. And the way they're doing this is by taking we are doing this actually, is taking a small part of Bol.com that is fairly isolated from the rest of the landscape, but critical for our users, and then apply all the SRE to it. Like, go all the way with SLOs, error budget policies, postmortems, transparency, and then just see how that works for us, and learn what we need as Bol.com to get the most value out of SRE. And then once we have that success story, we'll start rolling it out to the rest of the company. So what's the team doing now? For one part, it's focusing on evangelization to the rest of the teams. As I mentioned, there's quite a few enthusiasts who have already picked bits and pieces off. So we really want to do everything in our power to support those enthusiasts and give them the tools they need to get a head start on the SRE journey. On the other side, there's this well-isolated product that the team is focusing on that I talked about earlier. And then the third aspect is this on-call, out-of-office support issue that we've been struggling with. And so these are the three areas that the SRE team is currently focusing on. Now, for evangelization, most of what we did boils down to lots of writing documentation and getting clear links to like Google's and other documentation about SRE. And this is one of the advantages of not inventing our own. There's lots of good material out there. And then we've set up and rolled out a couple of trainings that we're giving to teams and business stakeholders. And the last part is we're building tooling to get clearer insight into both where we are on our SRE journey and how the non-functionals of these different systems correlate to each other. And then this product that I mentioned about, this is one of the most vital things we're doing, because this is where we're proving the value for Bol.com essentially. So we took the content product and what is the content product? This is a product page from our website, and then product content is anything that describes the product. So it's images, it's those images, it's the title, it's classification, but it's also its dimension. It can be movies about the product, it can be like manuals, and all sorts of things. And we get all this content from both suppliers and other retailers and employees, and then we have to transform it to standardize it and make it ready for the website, and then we have to serve it to our customers using the website. So all of that pipeline is what we chose as our first product to focus on. And when we started, we worked with the engineers and the POs in that product to get like a high overview of how all the different microsystems and services work together. And we analyzed this like the pros we are. And then we came to to get full coverage of the reliability of the systems, we're going to need 45 SLIs. And I was like, wait, 45 different metrics? That's not really a simple observable system. So then we went back into it and we abstracted things a little bit. And we ended up with 5 metrics, 5 SLIs that we think are most indicative of user unhappiness. So they will allow us to catch possible interruptions before they occur, and they are on the systems where we expect interruptions relevant interruptions to occur. And that way we can hope to align the content journey, all those different services, towards user happiness. Going pretty well on that journey. We're now at the point that we're defining the SLOs, and we're actually agreeing on the error budget policy. And it's really cool to start getting from theory to practice and start seeing that work. So it's quite awesome. And then the third part of what we're doing is the on-call support. And I mentioned that team that was started in 2017. And that was basically software engineers from the logistics space. And they were second line support to the operations team of the logistics space. So if the operations team needed insight into what the actual functionality was, or the functional impact of the systems that were down, then they would talk to the on-call logistics engineers. That worked fairly well, but for our cloud systems, we wanted to do that DevOps all the way. So we wanted to have Google, a platform, and then full operational ownership at the teams. But then we did have to fix that out-of-office support equation. So what we did is we took this logistics team, and we scaled it up and split it into 3 new teams. One for fulfillment, one for retailing, and one for shopping, which is different parts within our landscape, essentially. And then out of the 9 engineers that we originally had in this team, who were like part-time on-call software engineers, so they were in a Scrum team, but also part of an on-call rotation. We scaled that up to about 26 engineers separated over these 3 domains. That way, we made the support that we can give to cloud services much more scalable, and we're also rolling out the way to scale this up. So this was our step from 1 to N, and as we did, we documented and we improved the way of working. So we expect to have around 9 product domain teams of this on-call rotation in the end. All right, so that's what we're doing at Bol.com. We really believe that SRE is gonna improve the way we do DevOps significantly. And I definitely recommend anyone at an enterprise organization that's struggling with operational awareness and operational stability in their innovation rhythm to look into SRE and start their own SRE journey. And then some tips of things that went well for us. As I mentioned, it's an external framework, so use the resources that are out there. Google open sourced a really great SLO workshop. There's an awesome Coursera course that's well worth checking out. And then I think the ideas in SRE are really, really good. I'm extremely enthusiastic about these, and I am 99.99% sure that there are people in your organization that are also enthusiastic about this. So find them and use them to accelerate your journey. And then if at first you don't exceed, like we had with the part-time SRE team, don't stop, but squeeze all the learning out of it and try again. And then if you can tie it to concrete issues, that's gonna help a lot with convincing for upper management that this is a good idea. And be aware that the software engineering side is vital to getting SRE right. So just taking an existing operations team and that do automation because they're awesome, and just rebranding that as SRE, that's not going to help you. You really need to have that cross-discipline collaboration. So that was my talk. Thanks a lot, and I'm curious to see if there's any questions. One last thing, these are the attributions for the pictures I've used, and this is some links to Esri resources that you can use. All right.
Thanks for your talk. It's really interesting to see it. And you had like lots of extractions and the high level. And I think it was really valuable to you to show from a top-down view, you like how to get site reliability right.
Yeah, because as we were saying before as well, DevOps is not a trivial solution and a trivial problem, because it really is its own expertise.
Absolutely.
And we really almost banged our head against the wall of ignoring that at Bol.com. So new steps.
Many companies, uninformed companies, or companies like getting on the DevOps train, they think like, oh, great, now we have developers and admins, and developers can work because they want to have the server from the admin or need work from the admin, so they're blocked. We give all the responsibility to the developers, and then we don't have this bottleneck. But they don't know that very, very specific skills are required for this whole DevOps train, and it's a huge ecosystem which has to be mastered, bit by bit, by continuous improvement.
Go ahead.
No. I would just didn't want to.
Okay.
So you can.
And that also speaks to something that is that I've also been championing at Bol.com, and that's the relation between specialization and broad applicability of skills. So there is people that specialize deeply in operations, and there's people that specialize deeply in development. And I think what it needs to get SRE right is to also make room for the people that can specialize deeply in that role of site reliability engineer.
I was wondering during your talk, how many calls are there to the on-call team in the middle of the night? Like, how often does it happen that something crashes and manual intervention has to be done, and it has to be taken care of manually?
Yeah, so there's two aspects to this angle, and there's the cloud side and there's the DC side. And the DC side, that's like our legacy operations, and that's still managed by our legacy operations team. And they have lots of legacy alerts that fire quite a lot. And there like still we have exactly, and
already used to this.
Exactly, and half of them is, this is CPU, it's not a problem. And like the people there, they know that that's not a problem through experience, but they don't know what it means for the functionality. But apparently it's not a problem because it wasn't the problem a year ago. So we still have quite a lot of that. But then in our cloud services, that's where we're doing it differently. And that's where we're really alerting only on these SLOs, essentially. And there you see that we have quite a lot less calls, but it's also because we're really not that far on our cloud journey yet. So that experience is slightly colored by the fact that A, practically all those applications are new, and B, only like being generous, I think like a third of our landscape has been transitioned to the cloud. So and it's also not really the most critical services yet, because of course migrating those is the most work. So
and the highest risk. But the services who were migrated, they have a better reliability now in the cloud than they had before. Can you say this? I mean,
Yeah,
that did it improve.
yeah. So
I think that's what you were aiming for.
yeah, but like at the gut level, definitely. But there was also the clear notion that it was not good enough yet. And that's also one of these issues that, like the knowledge issue that I highlighted. That's because we've given the developers the responsibility, and some of them did that really well, and some of them did do that not at all. And then for those cloud applications, it would just be noticed by a business user calling someone's like, "This is not working," and that would be so. It's really not a clear cut before after situation.
Okay, I see. How many microservices are there at bol.com in total? Can you give an estimate on this?
Yeah, estimate like 1,200, something like that. But yeah, that changes all the time.
Okay.
As new ones get spun up and old ones get
all the time, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much all the time. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned that at some point you put the responsibility for the 24 hours uptime, you put it on the developers, really.
Yeah.
How did they react? Say, okay, we learned technology and can do this? Or it's like, what? I'm here from 9 to 5, and if something breaks on the weekend, I'll...
To be honest, when we did it, most didn't notice because they didn't realize it happened.
Okay.
So
sneaked it in somewhere.
Yeah, and quite a lot only realized, like, do you know that you're responsible out of office hours for your own services? Like, huh. But yeah, that's like the same people. Yeah, and then it's quite an organization where people get lots of freedom at bol.com. So that means that most of the connections are people connections, like people around, and that also means that the people responsible that figure out that something is breaking, that they know how to find the people that are responsible for this. But this is all like non-formalized, and it works, but not really quickly, and not as good as we'd hoped. And that's also really a step that we're aiming for SRE to formalize it in a way that maintains the flexibility but optimizes the quality.
Okay. And SRE has been put into place at bol.com for how long now?
So as I mentioned, individuals were doing it in different places for, I think, seriously about 2 years now, and this central team is like half a year. So we're really on the start of our journey yet, and that's also, I'm really looking for other people who are also on this journey and who want to learn from what we're doing, and also give us the opportunity to learn from what they're doing.
Okay.
Because we definitely haven't figured it out yet, but.
So there was, you've been doing this extensively for half a year, and there has been some review right now, like after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, to see if the development is going in the direction which you're aiming for, or it's just everyone's noticing, okay, we're getting better and better, and we still have to continue on this path.
Yeah, so we're doing like we're in evaluation of the first half year right now, and the biggest value for bol.com that we've already delivered is this upscaling of that on-call rotation, because we as I said, we had given this responsibility to the development teams, but we hadn't given them the tools to really take ownership of this. And so now we turned this responsibility. We created this software engineers on duty groups that can be on call for your team, but you as the team are responsible. But through the use of these SRE standards, you can work together with us and the SOD team to get formalized support out of office hours. And the fun part is that in every interaction that we do there is that you notice that the reliability improves, because basically what we're doing there is we're connecting deep knowledge about reliability with deep knowledge of an application. And when you bring those two together, then you, I think I said this 2 weeks ago somewhere, there's not a single meeting that we've had that has not improved the reliability of Bol.com.
Okay,
and
it's a great discovery, if you can say this.
yeah, that was also something. I was like, whoa, you can't see me anymore, but I'm making the mind blown sign.
You can try it. Just switch on your camera and we see if it's good.
Right.
Gets back, because it was.
Okay, yeah, I was like, boom.
Okay. And how did you do the transition to the DevOps? You just took the developers you had and, teach them the new way, or set aside time slots for them, like, okay, learn this stuff, educate yourself on this, or you hired or brought in new people who were already doing this to help your current team to adapt new methodologies?
Yeah, so that was also a really interesting project. I must say there's some really interesting presentations by other people at Bol.com that really go through that process. But what we did basically is we defined a couple of levels of DevOps maturity. And we worked with the operations teams to provide the tooling that developers needed to do their own operations. So make things like our alerting stack and our monitoring stack available for everyone, our deployment stack, make that available for everyone. Then as the teams went through training and through adoption of these new tools, they would raise their maturity level and get like there'd be celebrations, and they get like a reward of you are now Man on the Moon level 1. You are now Man on level 2. Yeah, no, there was this big graph that had all the teams in rings, and then the closer you were to the center, and it was a big project.
Wow.
Sorry, what did you say?
Education by gamification. So you just you level up, like sifting through the ranks. If you learn this, do this, and get certified. Yeah. That's actually kind of cool. I have to memorize this idea for our own company. Then a bit competition sometimes helps to speed things up. Yeah.
Yeah, and also like making it visible really is like, hey, everyone is on this higher level and we're on the lower level. Maybe this is a good idea to spend some time on this.
I'm the last one on the lower level, so that's what I meant by competition. I think,
yeah, exactly.
I think IT people generally want to learn something new. I've never actually, I really think hard. No, I never actually met somebody who says like, I don't want to look into this, because except JavaScript maybe, but it's not like they didn't want to learn something new. Like they learned it and they figured out they didn't want it, then that's another case. But like, okay, this is something new, I'm not interested in it.
Couldn't figure out.
Nobody works in tech has this attitude, I think. Okay,
at least not very long, I guess.
Not very long, and I think that you don't get there if you don't want to learn and improve continuously. Bart, thank you very much for your talk and for the great Q&A session.
Thank you as well. Interesting questions.
Yes, thank you. I'm just kind of curious, so I ask lots of questions. And if
you should be in tech.
I am in tech. I'm a developer. Yeah.
Oh wow!
And I think the next session will be on quality, but it's not on the channel here. It's test code and mock and roll. We have to figure out to find this. But yeah, you were last but not least. So I'm closing the DevOps track for today, or the operations track for today. And it was so cool to have you here. Thank you, Bart.
Cool. Thanks a lot.